Hello, and welcome to the channel. If you're searching for stories that blend emotion, intrigue, and empowerment, especially those about stepping into someone else's shoes, literally, then you're in the right place. What would you do if your school suddenly forced all the boys to wear pantyhose and skirts just so they could understand how girls feel? For me, it wasn't just a question. It was the beginning of a month I'll never forget. My name is Leo. Until my sophomore year, my life was aggressively predictable, quietly normal, almost boring. I was 16, had a small circle of friends, decent grades, and a hopeless crush on a girl named Chloe, who sat 2 rows ahead of me in chemistry and had absolutely no idea I existed. My biggest worry had been an upcoming pop quiz I hadn't studied for. Life was simple, linear, beige. Then came the first day of school, and Principal Thompson decided to splash my world with a shocking, horrifying shade of pink. The auditorium was packed, buzzing with the stale mix of waxed floors and teenage anxiety, the standard back-to-school assembly in full swing. "Good morning, students," Principal Thompson said, tapping the microphone. The resulting screech of feedback made everyone wince. She was a stern-looking woman in her 50s, sharp, angular suits cutting through her frame, the kind of woman who looked like she could calculate the square root of a hurricane. "I trust you all had a restful summer," she continued, her voice crisp and unwavering. But summer restfulness was the last thing on anyone's mind when she leaned in to announce her new initiative, an experiment in empathy, discipline, and social conditioning. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. My friend Mike, a lanky basketball fanatic, nudged me with a puzzled grin. "Social what? Is she going to make us do trust falls?" I shrugged, but a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. Principal Thompson didn't casually toss words like initiative around. Those words meant homework, discipline, and life-altering rules. And then came the bombshell. Effective immediately, the student dress code was being amended. Female students would continue as before, adhering to the existing guidelines, but all male students would now be required to wear the new standard issue uniform. There was a pause, a pregnant silence, and then a teacher wheeled out a mannequin from behind the curtain. My eyes caught the nightmare on display: a white polo shirt, a short pleated navy blue skirt, and beneath that, bright, screaming pink tights. The mannequin's feet were encased in black Mary Janes. For 3 seconds, the auditorium didn't breathe. It was the kind of silence that follows a car crash when your brain refuses to process what it's seeing. Then chaos erupted, a low rumble of laughter, disbelief, and outrage, swelling into a roar. "You can't be serious," yelled someone. "Is this a joke?" shouted a football jock. Principal Thompson raised her hand. The room went tense, the angry hum settling into a wary hush. "This is not a joke," she declared, her voice slicing through the chaos. "This uniform is mandatory. It is designed to foster humility, challenge preconceived notions of masculinity, and teach you to walk in another's shoes. Literally, you will learn empathy. You will learn discipline." My mind reeled. A skirt, pink tights. I glanced at Mike, whose jaw had practically dropped to the floor. Across the room, I saw Chloe, her expression unreadable as she whispered to her friends. The thought of her seeing me or any of us in that getup made my body flush with heat. "Uniforms will be distributed during homeroom," Principal Thompson continued, her tone as if she were announcing the weather. "Any student not in proper uniform by tomorrow would be sent home. A second infraction, suspension, a third, expulsion. No exceptions." Then the assembly was dismissed. We shuffled out like a zombie horde, not with groans, but with whispers of furious confusion. "My dad's going to sue the school," muttered one kid. "I'm transferring," said another. Mike just shook his head, muttering, "This has to be illegal." Civil rights violation or something. I didn't speak. I couldn't. All I could do was imagine it. Me, Leo, invisible, shy, reduced to a short skirt, and fluorescent pink tights. It felt like a fever dream, a horrible, humiliating, neon fever dream. Back in homeroom, the nightmare became tangible. Mr. Harrison, our teacher, looked as uncomfortable as we did while handing out the sealed plastic bags that contained the uniforms. Each bag had my name printed neatly on a label. Inside, the skirt, pink tights, and Mary Jane's. The bag felt less like clothing and more like evidence from a crime scene. Clutching it, I walked home, my safe beige world irrevocably gone. That evening, the uniform sat on my bed like a venomous creature. The plastic crinkled with every tentative breath I took near it. My mom had seen it, and after a long, confused phone call with another parent, shrugged. "Well, a rule is a rule. At least you won't have to decide what to wear," she said. She was trying to be helpful. She failed spectacularly. Hours later, I faced the inevitable. I had to try it on. I locked my bedroom door, ripped open the plastic, and lifted the tights. They were impossibly long, thin, silky, and screamingly pink. Pulling them on was like shoving a sausage into a straw. The fabric caught on every hair, clung to my legs, and felt unnatural in every conceivable way. Standing in nothing but a t-shirt, I wrestled with them, losing my balance twice before finally stretching the waistband over my hips. The sensation was bizarre. Constriction and exposure all at once. Then came the skirt. I stepped in, tugged it up, and felt the pleats flare awkwardly around me. Shorter than imagined, brushing mid-thigh, it made me laugh and cringe simultaneously. And then the shoes. The Mary Janes clicked softly against the hardwood floor, each step a small, humiliating announcement. Click, I'm a boy in a skirt. Clack, I hate my life. For 10 minutes, I paced, shifted, and stared at my reflection, trapped in a cocktail of shame, fear, and disbelief. Finally, I couldn't bear it any longer. I tore off the clothes, tossed them into a shadowed corner, and embraced the rough, comforting denim of my old jeans. But the phantom sensation lingered, the smooth nylon, the swish of the skirt, the tight waistband. Tomorrow, I would face a test far greater than any quiz. Survival. The walk to school was excruciating. Each step felt measured, painfully visible, as the early morning air hit the bare skin between the skirt and my socks. I had stuffed the tights into my backpack, hoping to delay the inevitable. Sideways along walls, hoodie up, hands buried in pockets, I tried to disappear, but nothing worked. The world had a giant neon sign plastered across it. "Look at the idiot in the skirt." People stared, smirked, and laughed. Faces blurred into a parade of judgment, and my blush burned with a persistent, torturous heat. Mike waited at the bike racks, clad fully in the skirt and tights, looking as miserable as I felt. Around us, students experimented with resistance. Kevin and his jock crew had attempted baggy basketball shorts under their skirts, only to appear clunky and ridiculous. A teacher quickly corrected him, leaving him to trudge toward the bathroom, humiliated. The first bell rang, a shrill call to face our doom. We shuffled into the main hall, a visual cacophony of navy, white, and blinding pink. Laughter hummed low, nervous, mocking, and the girls? Some stared, some giggled, some looked on with what seemed like pity. And then I saw her, Chloe, her eyes flicking to mine. There was surprise, perhaps amusement. My heart hammered. She approached, calm and kind. "Hey, Leo," she said, "no mockery, no pity, just normal." My voice cracked as I replied, "Hey, Chloe." She smiled softly, saying, "You know, that shade of pink is actually kind of cute on you." My brain short-circuited. Cute? My prepared for ridicule mind could barely process kindness. For the first time that day, the crushing weight of humiliation lifted, if only slightly. "It was just clothes," she said. "Weird, yes, but just clothes." And for the first time, maybe, I believed her. The first few days after Chloe's small act of kindness blurred together in a haze of awkward adjustments, constant self-consciousness, and a low-grade, persistent anxiety that seemed to wrap itself around every step I took. Sitting down in class became an elaborate choreography of careful movements. Smooth the skirt, avoid wrinkles, adjust the pleats, make sure the tights weren't visible through the hem in any embarrassing way. Every time I shifted in my chair, I was acutely aware of the soft swish of fabric, the way it hugged my legs, and the faint, unfamiliar sheen of the pink nylon against my pale skin. Walking upstairs in the crowded hallways felt like performing in a spotlight. Every step was a calculation, every movement an assessment of what others might think. The bathrooms were a new level of strategic warfare. The school, in its infinite wisdom, had designated all restrooms as gender neutral, meaning that every time I entered, I was confronted with girls washing their hands, fixing their hair, checking makeup, and exchanging glances that ranged from curiosity to outright amusement. My first time inside, I froze, panic gripping me, and I turned immediately, exiting without accomplishing anything, silently cursing myself for every ounce of overthinking that had led me to this moment. I became a master of dehydration, rationing water, and strategically planning bathroom breaks to avoid exposure, each day a delicate exercise in self-preservation. Gym class, however, was the pinnacle of humiliation, a battlefield that revealed every flaw, every awkward gait, and every flaw in my ability to cope with this uniform. Coach Miller, a gruff ex-Marine with zero tolerance for excuses, treated the skirts with the same brutal seriousness as he did his whistle and stopwatch. "I don't care if you're wearing a tutu and tiara," he bellowed on day one. "You will run 20 laps. The act of running in a skirt was nothing short of torturous. The fabric flapped unpredictably, the elastic waistband pressed uncomfortably against my stomach, and every stride felt like a negotiation between balance and decorum. Yet amid the clumsy, flailing mess of pink and navy blue, something unexpected began to happen. Once the initial gut-wrenching embarrassment faded, we stopped being embarrassed of each other. We were all in the same ridiculous predicament, struggling with the same clumsy fabric, the same unfamiliar sensation of skin exposed in ways it never had been before. There was a strange, unspoken camaraderie that emerged from the shared absurdity, a solidarity in humiliation that, paradoxically, made the burden a little lighter. Slowly, the sheer impossibility of the first days gave way to a reluctant acclimatization. I began wearing the pink tights for entire days, and the revelation was surprising. They were comfortable. My jeans had always been stiff and restrictive, limiting movement, whereas these tights flexed with my every action. The skirt, once a source of shame, became a manageable part of my routine. The fabric swished with a rhythm that I began to anticipate, a movement that no longer screamed humiliation, but merely reminded me of the strange new normal I inhabited. I wasn't alone in discovering the practical upsides. Other students began to cope in creative ways. Artsy kids treated it as an opportunity to personalize, adding pins to their skirts or pairing them with combat boots. One quiet punk rocker, Seth, layered fishnet stockings over his pink tights, an act of rebellion and self-expression that reclaimed the narrative. Even Mike, after a week of constant whining and scowling, discovered a silver lining. "You know," he said during lunch, stretching his long legs under the table, "I have way more range of motion for my jump shot in this thing. It's weird, but true." And then there was the subtle, profound change inside me, a shift that Chloe had unknowingly catalyzed. Her small comment about the pink being cute wasn't a flippant compliment. It was a lens, a perspective that reframed my entire experience. I began noticing moments of kindness, subtle glances, and actions that weren't mocking or cruel. Bullies still existed, of course. Kevin and his crew thrived on snide remarks, calling us princess or skirt boy, but the majority of students simply adjusted. They stopped staring, stopped laughing, and started treating the uniform as just another aspect of school life. One afternoon, while struggling with a particularly gnarly chemistry equation in the library, I realized the depth of this change. My legs crossed in the chair, the skirt settling comfortably. I chewed the end of my pen in frustration over a mold-a-mask conversion problem. A voice beside me interrupted, precise and calm. "It's the molar mass." "You forgot to convert to moles first." Chloe had quietly taken the seat next to mine, her textbook open, and she pointed to the line in my notes, her presence comforting rather than intimidating. "Oh, right," I mumbled, feeling sheepish. "Thanks." She just smiled, calm and natural. "No problem. This chapter is brutal." The silence that followed was comfortable, companionable, broken only by the faint rustle of our pages and the soft swish of my skirt as I shifted. Hesitant, I asked, "Does it ever stop feeling weird?" Not daring to meet her eyes, sure she would laugh or pity me. She glanced at me, then at the skirt, then back at my face, considering my question seriously. "Does what?" she asked. Wearing this, I said vaguely, gesturing toward the ensemble that had once felt like a prison. She paused, thoughtful, then admitted, "I guess I'm used to wearing skirts, but if all the girls had to wear heavy overalls and steel-toed boots every day, it'd feel weird for a long time. But eventually, you get used to it. You kind of just do." It was simple, almost naive, yet it struck me like lightning. I had been so wrapped up in humiliation and shame that I hadn't stopped to consider it from this perspective. Normality is adaptable, and discomfort is transient. That night, I didn't just hang the skirt in my closet. I smoothed the pleats, watched the light catch the folds, and experienced a strange, almost imperceptible curiosity, a willingness to engage with this new identity, however fleeting. The reflection staring back at me was jarring, yes, but my intense self-loathing had diminished, replaced by a cautious acceptance, a budding curiosity. I twirled slowly in front of the mirror, watching the skirt fan and settle with fluidity, the tights stretching smoothly over my legs. The experience was transformative, not dramatic, but intimate. The shame hadn't vanished entirely. It lingered as a background hum. But there was now a flicker of something new, resilience, and then curiosity. Principal Thompson's initiative, once absurd and arbitrary in my mind, began to feel purposeful. The conversations and gossip in school swirled around theories. Was she insane? Part of some secret experiment? Or merely eccentric? None of the guesses approached the truth, which Chloe and I discovered entirely by accident while working on a history project about Northwood High's evolution over the past 20 years. The project required digging through the neglected archives in the basement, a musty, dusty room smelling of old paper and disuse. Chloe, clad in jeans and a band t-shirt, mused about catching a lung disease while brushing away layers of grime, while I, in my full uniform, maneuvered carefully around metal filing cabinets, my tights grotesquely bright in the dim, flickering light. We sifted through old yearbooks and student records, laughing over terrible 90s fashion, the goofy expressions of our teachers decades ago, gradually losing ourselves in the small human stories hidden in the files. And then I found it, a thick manila folder marked with Thompson E. Research and Proposals, containing dense academic papers and psychological journals, authored by Dr. Evelyn Thompson herself. The titles alone told a story. The role of enforced uniformity in reducing clique-based aggression, challenging gender constructs in adolescent environments, empathy induction through mandated role reversal. My pulse quickened. Chloe leaned over, eyes wide. "She's a psychologist," I whispered. "This isn't arbitrary. It's an actual structured experiment." Within the folder, a smaller file revealed a faded newspaper clipping and incident reports from a decade prior, detailing the tragic story of Alex Carter, A gentle, artistic freshman bullied relentlessly for failing to conform to toxic ideas of masculinity, culminating in his suicide. A handwritten proposal by a younger Evelyn Thompson advocating radical anti-bullying strategies was attached, rejected by the school board at the time. Chloe's whispered realization, that's why she did it, for him, for Alex, hit me with full force. Principal Thompson's initiative was not a whimsical act of cruelty or eccentricity. It was a mission, a decade-long effort to prevent another tragedy like Alex's, to teach empathy, compassion, and resilience through experience. In that dusty, forgotten room, the uniform on my legs became more than polyester and pink nylon. It became a symbol, a shield, a legacy. My shame felt trivial beside the weight of history and purpose resting in those files. The skirt was no longer merely humiliating. It was a tangible connection to something profoundly human, a mission to prevent cruelty and cultivate understanding. We replaced the files, silent, knowing we couldn't share this revelation. To outsiders, it might look like manipulation or abuse, but we understood. Walking home that day, the stares from strangers no longer pricked as sharply. I was part of something bigger than embarrassment. I was part of an experiment in empathy, in compassion, in reshaping the rigid lines that had defined adolescence for generations. The pink tights had ceased being a joke. They were a statement. The fragile calm that had settled over the school walls, a tentative acceptance born of repetition and familiarity, was about to collide with the unyielding force of the outside world. The parents were not adapting as gracefully as the students had. Rumors had swirled for weeks, but it all came to a head with the sudden arrival of a flyer slipped into every mailbox, a call to arms that read, "Concerned parents of Northwood Hightown Hall meeting demand the immediate repeal of the unconscionable and psychologically damaging mandatory male dress code." At the dinner table that evening, my dad held it in his hands, his brow furrowed, a mixture of incredulity and anger etched into his face. He muttered under his breath, grumbling about lawsuits, about the absurdity of forcing boys into skirts and pink tights, about the erosion of masculinity and tradition, his words a familiar echo of the outrage circulating through town. "Dad," I said cautiously, poking at my mashed potatoes, my voice carrying the strange confidence I had cultivated over the past weeks. "It's just clothes. That's all it is. We're all used to it now. We survived. We're fine." The words felt alien in my own mouth, a stark contrast to the vehement arguments I would have made a month ago, but he merely shook his head, unconvinced, muttering, "We'll see what happens at this meeting." The night of the town hall arrived with an atmosphere charged with tension. The school auditorium packed far beyond its usual capacity. The air crackled with parental anger, an electric storm of fear, prejudice, and tradition. Chloe and I found our seats near the back, flanked by Mike and a handful of other students who, for varying reasons, had come to accept or even embrace the uniform, or at least had chosen not to actively resist it. The room was dominated by the loud, aggressive presence of Kevin's father, a large, red-faced man whose voice boomed over the murmuring crowd. He was leading the charge, framing Principal Thompson's initiative as a bizarre social experiment designed to confuse, humiliate, and psychologically manipulate their sons. Their words a torrent of accusation and fear. "This is an outrage!" he shouted, pounding his fist on the podium for emphasis. "Principal Thompson is conducting a psychological experiment on our children without consent. She is confusing them, humiliating them, and turning our school into a laughingstock." The audience responded with a chorus of angry affirmations. "Yes! Exactly. That's right." Others joined in with cries of outrage, decrying the erosion of masculinity, the violation of tradition, the imagined psychological damage inflicted by skirts and pink tights. Parents argued that boys were supposed to be tough, stoic, and masculine, and that forcing them into clothing associated with femininity was a crime against nature, a moral violation, a form of child abuse. Principal Thompson stood quietly at the side of the stage, her hands clasped behind her back, her expression unreadable, allowing the torrent of fear, prejudice, and fury to wash over her. Her silence was not passive. It was a calm, measured endurance, the kind of patience honed by years of understanding human behavior, knowing that anger often needed to vent before reason could emerge. Chloe glanced at me, concern and determination intermingling in her eyes. We both knew the real story behind the skirts, the tragic catalyst that had birthed this initiative. But we also knew that revealing it here, in front of an angry crowd, would be disastrous. The grief and the purpose behind the rule would be twisted, reframed as manipulation, coercion, or worse. It was a secret we had to protect. And then, as the cacophony reached a fever pitch, Principal Thompson stepped forward, her voice calm and unwavering, cutting through the chaos like a blade of clarity. "I understand your concerns," she began, her tone steady, deliberate, each word carrying the weight of experience and conviction. "This is a radical departure from the norm, and it is uncomfortable. But I ask you to consider the purpose. It is not to humiliate, to confuse, or to harm. It is to cultivate empathy, to challenge rigid notions of gender, to allow our children to explore the vast spectrum of human experience without fear or prejudice. What we are doing is not a punishment. It is a learning process." But her measured reasoning collided with a wall of disbelief. "It's child abuse," someone yelled, the room erupting once more into a storm of shouting, accusations, and disbelieving murmurs. Parents spoke over one another, their voices a chaotic symphony of fear and misunderstanding, pointing fingers, questioning motives, invoking tradition, morality, and masculinity, yet all the while failing to see the very human lesson at the core of this initiative. My chest tightened, a surge of heat and resolve flooding through me. I thought of Alex Carter, of the boy who had suffered in silence, crushed under the weight of societal expectations, whose life had been stolen by the very rigid definitions these parents now clung to like armor. I thought of the shame I had carried, now dwarfed by the gravity of that tragedy, and a fire of indignation rose within me, not against the skirts, not against the tights, but against the ignorance and fear that had perpetuated such cruelty for generations. Without even realizing it, I was on my feet. "Leo, what are you doing?" Mike hissed, grabbing my arm, but I shrugged him off, the path before me opening as if the universe itself had cleared the way. Every eye in the auditorium turned to watch the boy in the skirt and pink tights walk toward the microphone, the soft, rhythmic click of the patent leather shoes announcing each step like a drumbeat of defiance. My heart pounded violently against my ribs, my hands trembled, but I pressed on, stepping onto the stage, standing beside Principal Thompson, feeling the weight of history, of empathy, and of courage settle over me. I took a deep breath, the microphone cool and foreign beneath my fingers, and spoke. "Hi, my name is Leo. I'm a sophomore here at Northwood High. When Principal Thompson announced this uniform, I hated it. I think every boy here did. I was embarrassed, humiliated, and terrified of what everyone would think, including you." The room fell into a tense silence, the initial shock of a student's voice breaking the parental chorus. I continued, my voice growing steadier, stronger, fueled by weeks of reflection and experience. The first day, it was one of the worst days of my life. I felt like a freak. I just wanted to be invisible. But then, something changed. We kept going to school, we did our work, we ran laps. A few kids chuckled, but eventually it became normal. This skirt, these tights, they stopped being a costume. They became our uniform. And in that, I realized something important. This uniform didn't make us weaker. It forced us to be stronger. I gestured to the fabric, to the pleats and the pink, to the symbol it had become. You are worried this makes us soft, confused, or less masculine. But what is truly confusing, truly damaging, is being told we can only be one way, that boys must be a certain way and girls another. It's not the skirt that limits us, it's the rigid expectations that have defined us for generations. I've worn jeans and t-shirts all my life. I was shy, scared of judgment. Now I'm standing here in a skirt and tights, and I am not afraid. That's the difference. That's the lesson silence enveloped the room, a profound, almost tangible pause as parents and students alike processed the unexpected conviction of a 16-year-old who had faced discomfort, fear, and ridicule, and had emerged with clarity, empathy, and courage. Then a single clap broke the stillness. Chloe. The applause grew slowly, joined by Mike, then a handful of other students. Not a roar, not a triumphal celebration, but enough. Enough to mark the beginning of a shift, a seed planted in the minds of those unwilling to see beyond fear and tradition. The aftermath was not a perfect, cinematic victory. Life remained messy, complicated, and unpredictable. Yet the conversation had been reframed. Voices that had only shouted in anger now had to reckon with perspective, with experience, with the tangible growth of the students themselves. The school board, under pressure from vocal parents but also swayed by the students' testimonials, amended the policy. The uniform was no longer mandatory. Boys could choose traditional pants and polo or skirt and tights. Choice replaced coercion, and with it, the power of the uniform shifted from symbol of oppression to symbol of freedom. On Monday, the halls were a blend of old and new. Some boys returned to pants with palpable relief, shoulders relaxed, movements unburdened by fabric and expectation. Others, like Seth, continued in skirts with added flair. Mike, resilient and adaptable, wore his skirt with a confident shrug, his earlier complaints replaced by acknowledgement of the practical and liberating aspects. And I, standing before my closet, faced the most personal of decisions. The pants called to me with promises of ease, invisibility, retreat, and comfort. But the skirts and tights represented resilience, courage, and authenticity, a reminder of what I had endured and what I had learned. With a deep breath, I chose the skirt, the pink tights replaced by a new pair of black, and walked to school with quiet pride, fully aware that this choice was mine, fully aware that comfort could coexist with courage. The days that followed were textured with a new kind of normal, a hallway's mix of pants and skirts, choices and preferences, self-expression and solidarity. My relationship with Chloe flourished, evolving from shared secret to genuine friendship to tentative romance, all colored by the experience that had forged confidence and clarity. We studied together, shared meals, laughed over trivialities, and the skirt was no longer a barrier, but a part of our story. When the formal arrived, I faced a mirror reflecting the culmination of transformation. Button-down shirt and dress pants felt like a costume, whereas the skirt and black tights felt like authenticity. Chloe's eyes widened, a slow smile spreading across her face. "It's perfect," she whispered, and in that moment the awkward, humiliating, transformative journey of weeks crystallized into quiet joy. We danced, we laughed, we existed fully, our individuality no longer constrained by arbitrary definitions. Around us, the school reflected a subtle but profound shift. Laughter mingled with courage, choice mingled with empathy, and the lessons of discomfort, resilience, and human complexity rippled through students, teachers, and even reluctant parents. Principal Thompson watched, ever vigilant, a small, satisfied smile hinting at the depth of her understanding. She knew, as did we, that this was not an end but a continuation, the beginning of a culture where empathy, resilience, and freedom could flourish, And the fabric of a skirt, once a symbol of humiliation, had become a thread in the tapestry of growth, courage, and change.